Get out of my house right now! I never want to see you again!
Same one Jane had packed with trembling hands the night she boarded a plane believing Seoul would be the start of something good, and threw it into the hallway. It hit the opposite wall and split open, spilling clothes across the tile. Yonhee, wait, you don't understand what you just saw. The door slammed, the lock turned. Jane stood in the hallway of an apartment building that wasn't hers, in a country where she had exactly one emergency contact, and that contact had just locked her out in the rain. She pounded on the door, once, twice, a third time softer because some part of her already knew no one was going to open it. Please, just let me explain. Nothing. Somewhere behind that door was the aunt who had written her a year ago. Come stay with us. Jane, there's nothing left for you back home. We'll figure it out together. And somewhere behind that same door was a husband who had smiled at her over breakfast that morning like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't cornered her in the kitchen 4 different times in 6 weeks. Like his hand hadn't been on her wrist 30 seconds before Yonhee walked in and saw exactly what he wanted her to see. Jane gathered the clothes off the floor with shaking hands. She didn't cry yet. She was too angry to cry yet. By the time she made it outside, the anger had frozen into something colder. Rain came down in sheets, the kind that soaked through in under a minute, and Jane stood on the curb with a broken suitcase and no plan, because for the first time since she'd left home, she had absolutely nowhere to be. If you've ever been punished for someone else's lie, if you've ever told the truth and watched it get thrown back in your face, stay with me on this one, because Jane's night was about to get a lot stranger before it got better. Drop where you're watching from tonight, Queens. I want to know who's riding with me on this one. Headlights cut through the rain. A line of black cars, 4 of them, slowing along the curb like they had no business slowing down for anyone. The kind of cars that made people on the sidewalk look away on instinct. The convoy started to pass her. Then it stopped. A back window lowered halfway. A small hand pushed through the gap, fingers stretching toward the rain, toward the stranger standing alone on the curb, and a baby's voice broke into a sound that wasn't quite a cry and wasn't quite a laugh. Inside the car, Dongwook froze. His daughter hadn't reached for anything in 3 months. Not for him, not for her nurse, not for the mobile hanging over her crib. Since the day her mother disappeared, Hana had gone quiet in a way that made grown men in his organization lower their voices around her, as if loudness might break whatever was left. And now, she was reaching through a half-open window at a rain-soaked stranger on the side of the road. The door opened. Dongwook stepped out into the rain without an umbrella, which his men would later say they'd never seen him do, not even for himself. Why are you standing out here alone? Jane looked up at him, tall, unreadable, tattoos climbing up from his collar that told her exactly what kind of man this was before he said another word. And something in her that should have run in the opposite direction simply didn't have the energy left to be afraid. The woman I called family threw me away. She said it flat, not looking for sympathy, just stating a fact she was still getting used to. Dongwook looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at his daughter, still reaching, still making that sound she hadn't made in 3 months. Get in the car. Jane hesitated. Every instinct she'd built over 6 weeks of learning to read a dangerous man's smile told her to be careful. But the baby was still reaching, and the rain wasn't stopping, and the suitcase in her hand held everything she owned in this country. I don't know you. No, you don't. He didn't move to convince her further. But you're standing in the rain with nowhere to go, and my daughter hasn't looked at anyone like that in 3 months. Make whatever decision you need to make. I won't ask twice. It was the lack of pressure that decided it. Every man who had ever wanted something from her had pushed. This one was simply waiting. She got in the car. The house Jane woke up in the next morning didn't feel like a mafia boss's house. It felt too quiet for that, too careful, like everyone inside it had learned to move without making noise. A woman named Mrs. O brought her tea she hadn't asked for, and clothes that fit a little too well to be a coincidence. Mr. Choi had these sent this morning. I don't need charity. It's not charity, it's practicality. Yours were ruined. Jane didn't argue further, but she filed the correction away. Mr. Choi, not whatever softer name she might have assumed a man like that went by. Dongwook. She'd have to remember that. Is he always like that? Jane asked, folding the unfamiliar clothes with careful hands. Picking up strangers off the street. Mrs. O's mouth twitched, the closest thing to a smile Jane had seen from her yet. Mr. Choi has never once picked up a stranger off the street, not before you. She straightened the tea tray, avoiding Jane's eyes just slightly. You should ask yourself why that changed last night. Jane didn't have an answer for that. She wasn't sure she wanted one yet. She found Hana in the nursery before she found him. The baby was propped against pillows, staring at nothing in particular, until Jane crouched down and Hana's whole body turned toward her like a compass finding north. Hey there. Hana grabbed a fistful of Jane's sleeve and didn't let go. She hasn't done that with anyone since her mother left. Jane looked up. Dongwook was in the doorway, arms crossed, watching his daughter's hand curl around a stranger's wrist like it belonged there. Left or disappeared. His jaw tightened around the word. 6 months ago, no note, no warning. One day she was here, the next day she wasn't, and I have spent every day since trying to find out why. Jane didn't offer him sympathy either. Something told her he wouldn't want it. I'm not staying here, so you can feel better about your daughter smiling again. I didn't ask you to stay for that. Then why did you ask me to stay at all? He didn't answer right away, and the silence between them stretched long enough that Jane almost regretted the question. Because you had nowhere else to go, and I don't leave people standing in the rain. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly warm. But it was honest, and after 6 weeks of her aunt's husband whispering lies with a smile on his face, honest felt like the rarest thing in the world. How long can I stay? For as long as it takes you to decide you don't want it anymore. He turned to leave, then paused in the doorway without looking back. There's a room being prepared near Hana's. Mrs. O will show you when it's ready. He was gone before Jane could ask why a man who ran a household like a fortress was giving a stranger a room beside his only child. The staff tested her in the way staff test anyone who shows up somewhere they don't belong. Quiet comments in Korean they assumed she wouldn't understand. A head of security named Ti-young who looked at her like she was a problem waiting to happen. She won't last a month, Jane heard him mutter to another guard on her 3rd day, not quite quiet enough. Mr. Choi has never let anyone this close to the house. She's a liability. Jane turned around slowly. If you have something to say to me, say it in a language I understand, or don't say it at all. Ti-young blinked. Nobody talked to him like that in this house. Nobody talked to anyone like that in this house, except, apparently, the man they all answered to. You understood that? I understand a lot more than people assume. It tends to work in my favor. She held his gaze without flinching. You can keep watching me if it makes you feel better, but talk about me like I'm not standing here again, and we'll have a different conversation. Word got back to Dongwook by dinner. You made an enemy of my head of security in under a week. I made him respect me in under a week. There's a difference. For the first time since she'd arrived, something close to amusement crossed his face. It disappeared fast, like he'd caught himself doing it, but Jane saw it, and she filed that away too. He's been with me 12 years. Nobody talks to him like that. Then maybe somebody should have a long time ago. Dongwook set down his chopsticks, studying her the way he might study an unexpected move across a chessboard. You're not afraid of me. I've been afraid of the wrong things for 6 weeks straight. I'm taking a break from it. Jane met his eyes across the table. Should I be afraid of you? That depends entirely on what you're planning to do in my house. Survive, that's the whole plan so far. Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but close enough that Jane noticed the absence of the coldness that usually lived there. If you're new here or you've been riding with me since the beginning, Queens, drop a comment and let me know, because trust me, This dinner table tension is just the beginning of what's coming. Hit that like button if Jane's not backing down from anybody in this house. The messages started 3 weeks later. A single line on her phone, from a number she didn't recognize. Watch what he eats when D-Sung's associates visit. Jane's stomach dropped at her uncle's name. She hadn't told anyone in this house about D-Sung. Not the harassment, not the accusation, not any of it. She'd buried that whole chapter the second the car doors closed behind her that first rainy night. So how did a stranger know his name? She didn't answer the message. She watched instead, quietly, the next time one of D-Sung's business associates came through the estate on unrelated matters, and she noticed the way Dong-wook's expression flattened the second the man's name was mentioned, controlled in a way that told her this wasn't the first time that name had crossed his radar either. "You know him," Jane said carefully once the associate had left. "D-Sung." Dong-wook's jaw tightened. "I know his name. I've never had reason to trust it." He studied her face, something calculating behind his eyes. "Why does that name make you go pale?" Jane hesitated. 6 weeks of silence, of being told her fear didn't matter, of watching her own aunt choose a liar over her. It had taught her to keep things locked down tight. "He's my aunt's husband." Dong-wook went very still. "The man who put you on that curb." "The man my aunt believed over me." Jane's voice didn't waver, but her hands did, just slightly. "He'd been harassing me for weeks. I tried to tell her. She was always too busy to listen. The night she threw me out, she caught something she completely misread because he made sure she would." Dong-wook's expression darkened in a way Jane hadn't seen from him yet, something dangerous moving behind his composure. "And now his name is showing up in anonymous messages, sent to you." "I don't know what that means." "Neither do I yet," he held her gaze, "but I intend to find out." Another message came 2 days later. "He's not who your aunt thinks he is. Be careful who you trust in that house, too." Jane started sleeping with her phone under her pillow, waiting for the next one, wondering if whoever was sending them was protecting her, or watching her. She found Dong-wook in Hana's nursery at 2 in the morning, 3 nights after the second message. She hadn't meant to fall asleep in the rocking chair, but the day had been long and Hana had fought sleep for over an hour, and somewhere in the quiet after the baby finally settled, Jane's eyes had closed too. She woke slowly, aware of warmth that hadn't been there before. Dong-wook's jacket was draped over her shoulders. He was standing by the crib, watching his daughter sleep, and he didn't say a word about the jacket, and neither did she. "You don't have to check on her every night," Jane said quietly, voice thick with sleep. "That's what I'm here for." "I know," he didn't turn around. "I check anyway." "Why?" "Because the last time I trusted someone else to watch over what mattered most, I lost her without a single warning." His voice was low, controlled, but something underneath it cracked just slightly. "I don't make that mistake twice." Jane sat up slowly, the jacket sliding from her shoulders. "I'm not her, whoever she was." "I know that too." He finally turned to look at her, and for a moment the careful distance he kept from everyone in this house seemed to thin out to almost nothing. "That's not a comfort the way you'd think it would be." Neither of them mentioned the jacket again after that night. But Jane noticed, for 3 days after, that it still smelled like him, and she told herself that was an entirely unimportant detail to notice. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just a story about a woman who got taken in off the street. It's about to get a lot more dangerous, and I need you to be here for the part where the truth comes out. Drop a comment telling me who you think is sending those messages, because I promise you, the answer is not what you expect. The argument started small and grew from there. Not shouting, not the kind of conflict Jane had learned to fear in her uncle's house, but something sharper. You keep this place locked down tighter than a prison, and you wonder why your own daughter barely smiles. I keep this place locked down because the people I'm protecting her from would use her against me without blinking. Then let some warmth in before there's nothing left to protect. He looked at her like no one had spoken to him that directly in years. Maybe no one had. You have no idea what you're talking about. I know what a cold house feels like from the inside. I lived in one for 6 weeks before your daughter reached out that window for me. Jane crossed her arms. You want to keep everyone at a distance so nothing can hurt you again. I understand that better than you think. But your daughter needs more than distance, Dongwook. She needs someone in this house who isn't afraid to hold her too tight. That silenced him in a different way than before. Not offended, just caught, like she'd said something true he hadn't wanted to hear out loud. He started seeking her out after that. Not obviously. A question about Hana's schedule that could have been asked through Mrs. O. A comment about dinner that didn't need to be said in person. An evening walk through the garden that happened to align with the exact hour Jane usually took Hana outside. Small excuses, and Jane noticed every one of them, and pulled back a little further each time. She caught herself looking forward to his excuses more than she should. Because she knew exactly where that road led. She'd spent 6 weeks under a roof where a powerful man's attention had nearly destroyed her. She wasn't going to hand her trust to another one just because this one had a kind streak buried under all those tattoos and all that control. You're doing it again, Mrs. O said one evening, watching Jane deliberately busy herself in the kitchen the moment Dongwook's car pulled into the drive. Doing what? Running from something you actually want. I don't know what you're talking about. You've been in this house 2 months, and I've watched 12 years of women try to get close to that man for all the wrong reasons. Mrs. O set down the dish she was drying, studying Jane carefully. You're the first one who's tried to get away from him for the right ones. That tells me everything I need to know about how he feels. Jane didn't answer that. She didn't have a good one. The night everything collided started with a car Jane didn't recognize idling outside the estate gates for too long. She almost didn't mention it, but something about the messages, about Di-sung's name surfacing where it shouldn't, made her tell Ti-yong, who for once didn't argue with her instinct. How long has it been there? 20 minutes, maybe longer. Jane kept her voice low. It hasn't moved. Ti-yong's expression shifted from skepticism to alertness in an instant. Stay inside. I'll handle it. 2 hours later, a man got past the outer gate. Jane was in the garden with Hana when it happened. A shape moving too fast along the hedge line. A hand closing around her arm before she could scream. A voice low and furious in her ear. You should have kept your mouth shut. Di-sung told me you'd been talking to someone. What did they tell you? I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me. His grip tightened, dragging her back a step, and Hana let out a sharp cry against Jane's shoulder. Tell me who's been sending messages to your phone, or I make sure your little arrangement here ends tonight. Jane didn't have time to answer before Dongwook was there, and the man's grip on her arm was gone, and Dongwook had him pinned against the hedge with a speed that made her realize, all at once, exactly how much danger she'd actually been standing in. Touch her again, and it will be the last thing you do with that hand. The man struggled, but Dongwook's grip didn't waver, his voice dropping into something low and lethal that Jane had never heard from him before. Who sent you? You already know who sent me. Say his name. Di-sung. The man spat the name out like it cost him something. He said the American woman's been talking to someone who has evidence against him. He wants to know who. Dongwook's eyes cut to Jane, something furious and protective moving behind them, before he shoved the man toward the security team closing in from the house. Get him off my property. Find out everything he knows. Security dragged the man off. Dongwook turned to Jane, checking her over with a kind of urgency he hadn't let himself show before, hand closing around her waist to steady her when her knees went unsteady beneath her. Are you hurt? I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her whole body was shaking, and Hana was still crying against her shoulder. He said Di-sung sent him. He said I'd been talking to someone. Dongwook's hand was still at her waist. Neither of them moved to change that, not right away, the rain from earlier still clinging to the air between them, both of them breathing harder than the moment strictly required. Jane, who have you been talking to? She pulled her phone out with shaking hands and showed him the messages. His face changed reading them, not confusion, but recognition, like he was looking at a phrasing he knew. This isn't a stranger. Then who is it? He didn't answer right away. He was still staring at the screen like it had knocked the air out of him, his hand tightening slightly at her waist as though he needed something to hold on to while the realization settled. I think I know exactly who this is, and if I'm right, it changes everything. She came to the estate 2 nights later, alone, no security detail, no warning. Mrs. O nearly dropped the tray she was carrying when the woman walked through the front door like she still lived there. Sujin, Dong-wook's wife, presumed dead for 6 months, standing in his front hall looking thinner than her photographs, older around the eyes, but unmistakably, impossibly alive. Dong-wook went white. You're supposed to be dead. I know. That was the plan. It's the only reason I'm still breathing. Jane stood frozen at the top of the stairs, watching a dead woman explain her own disappearance to the husband she'd left behind. Sujin's eyes found her before she finished the thought. You're Jane. I've been watching you for weeks. You sent those messages. I sent those messages because I couldn't reach anyone in this house without risking exposing myself, and I needed someone Sung's people wouldn't think to watch, someone with nothing to lose and nowhere to run, and no reason to be trusted by anyone in his circle. Sujin's voice cracked, just slightly. I found evidence 6 months ago that Sung was trafficking information, and people, through men connected to Dong-wook's organization. He found out I knew. I had to disappear before he made sure I disappeared permanently. You left your daughter. The words came out of Jane before she could stop them, sharper than she meant. Sujin flinched like she'd been struck, but she didn't look away. I left my daughter because staying would have got her killed alongside me. I have spent 6 months hiding in silence while a woman I've never met raised her instead. And I have watched. From a distance, I hated every single day as that woman gave her something I couldn't. Her eyes were wet now. You gave her a reason to reach for someone again. I am never going to be able to repay you for that. Dong-wook's hands were shaking at his sides. You could have told me. You could have trusted me. I couldn't trust anyone who might slip, even by accident, and get both of us killed. Sujin took a step closer, and Dong-wook took one back, the distance between them heavier than the 6 months apart had been. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. But I brought proof tonight because it's finally safe enough to end this, and Sung is going to answer for every part of it. She held out a folder, hands trembling. Everything is in here, every name, every transaction, every man who let it happen and looked away. Dong-wook didn't take it right away. He was still looking at her like he was trying to decide whether the woman standing in front of him was real. 6 months, Sujin. I know. Her voice broke completely now. I know what it cost. I made peace with never getting it back the day I walked out that door. I only came back to end this and to say thank you to the woman who did what I couldn't. If you thought this story was just about a rescue in the rain, I need you to sit with me for this next part, Queens, because the truth is about to blow this whole family wide open, and I want to hear what you think happens next. Comment below and tell me if you saw this coming. The evidence went public within 48 hours. Bank transfers, shipment logs, names of men who had used Sung's business as cover for exactly the kind of trafficking Sujin had uncovered 6 months ago. Sung was arrested at his office, in front of colleagues who had no idea what he'd been hiding behind his tailored suits and easy smile. The story broke across every major outlet within a day. Sung's name attached to charges that made the harassment he'd put Jane through look small by comparison, though Jane knew better than anyone that it had never been small at all. Yeonhee found out from the news before anyone had the decency to call her. She showed up at the estate gates that same afternoon, eyes swollen from crying, asking to see her niece. Taeyong came to find Jane in the garden, uncertain. She says she's her aunt. She won't leave. Jane's first instinct was to say no. Let her sit at the gate the way Jane had sat on that curb, soaked and alone, with no one willing to open a door for her. She went anyway, because some part of her needed to say what she hadn't been allowed to say the night she was thrown out. Yeonhee looked smaller than Jane remembered. the confidence that had once filled every room she walked into completely gone. I believed him over you. Yonhee's voice broke on every word. My own husband over my sister's daughter. I will never forgive myself. Good, you shouldn't. Yonhee flinched. Do you know what it cost me, trying to tell you the truth for 6 weeks? Jane's voice stayed level, but every word carried weight she'd been holding since the night the door slammed shut. I tried 4 different times. I sat you down. I told you what he was doing. You told me you were too busy, that I must be misunderstanding him, that he would never. And then the one time it actually mattered, you didn't even ask me what happened. You just believed the version that was easiest for you. Jane, I'm not here to make this easy for you. Jane held her ground, steady in a way she hadn't been able to be 6 months ago. You didn't have to save me, Yonhee. I never needed saving. You only had to believe me, and you couldn't even give me that. Yonhee had no answer for that, because there wasn't one that would fix what had already broken. What will it take? Yonhee's voice was barely above a whisper. For you to forgive me. I don't know yet. Maybe nothing will. Maybe someday something will. Jane's voice softened, just slightly, the anger giving way to something more tired than cruel. But it starts with you understanding that an apology isn't the same thing as being believed 6 months ago, when it actually mattered. Jane walked away first. It didn't feel like victory. It just felt like something finally being said out loud. The house felt different after that, lighter in some rooms, heavier in others, because Soo-jin's presence had unsettled something between Jane and Dong-wook that neither of them had put into words yet. Soo-jin stayed at a safe distance during the legal proceedings, careful not to reveal herself publicly until Di-sung's case was airtight. In private, she watched Hana from across a room, careful, aching, never once trying to take the child from Jane's arms. I'm not here to take my place back, she told Jane quietly one evening, the two of them alone by the nursery window while Hana slept between them. I gave that up the day I disappeared, whether I meant to or not. I just needed her to be safe, and she is, because of you. You're her mother. I'm the woman who kept a secret that nearly got her killed. You're the one who stayed up with her through every fever, every nightmare, every night she cried for someone, and you were the one who came. Soo-jin's eyes were steady now, resolved. That makes you more of a mother than 6 months of hiding ever could. I'm going to step back, Jane. Not out of her life completely, but out of yours and Dong-wook's, the way it's clearly meant to be. You don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. Soo-jin smiled, small and sad and genuine all at once. I want to. Watching the two of you together these past few weeks, even through everything falling apart around us, I haven't seen him look at anyone like that. Not even me, if I'm honest. Let me give you both this. It's the only gift I have left to give. Jane didn't know what to say to that. She wasn't sure there was anything to say. Dong-wook found her there minutes later, after Soo-jin had gone, standing at the window with her arms wrapped around herself. She told you the same thing she told me. That she's stepping back. That it's clearly meant to be. He came to stand beside her, close enough that his shoulder nearly brushed hers. I haven't been able to stop thinking about that night in the garden, or the night in this exact room with my jacket around your shoulders. I told myself it didn't mean anything both times. Did you believe yourself? No. Jane turned to face him. The restraint he'd carried since the day she arrived, controlled, careful, never once pushing, cracked for the first time right in front of her. I'm not going to be anyone's rescued responsibility again, Dong-wook. I spent too much of my life being someone's unwanted burden, and I won't spend the rest of it being someone's charity case either. I don't want you as a responsibility, I want you as a choice. He reached for her hand, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted to. She didn't. So choose, Jane, not because you have nowhere else to go, not because I saved you from the rain. Choose because you want to. I need time. Take it. His thumb brushed once across her knuckles before he let go, stepping back to give her exactly the space he'd promised her that very first night. I've waited 6 months to find out the truth about my own life. I can wait for you to be sure about yours. 6 months later, Jane stood in a small studio space she'd leased with her own money, signage going up above the door for a business built entirely from her own 2 hands. nothing borrowed, nothing given, nothing owed to anyone. She'd spent the months after Sung's arrest building something that was entirely hers, taking meetings alone, learning contracts alone, refusing every offer Dongwook made to smooth the process along. "Let me help," he'd said once, watching her stay up past midnight over a stack of paperwork. "You already did. You gave me a place to land." Jane hadn't looked up from the papers. "This part I need to do myself." He hadn't argued after that. He'd simply started showing up in the evenings after work, Hana on his hip, watching Jane close up shop with the kind of pride he didn't bother hiding anymore. "Marry me." Jane laughed, wiping paint off her fingers. "That's not a very romantic way to ask." "I've asked 3 times already. You keep changing the subject." "Because I needed you to understand something first." She crossed the room, taking Hana from his arms, the baby immediately curling into her the way she had that very first rainy night. "If I marry you, Dongwook, it will be because I choose you, not because you saved me, not because I have nowhere else to go. I built this." She gestured at the studio around them. "Without you. I can build a life without you too, so if I choose this, it's because I want it, not because I need it." Dongwook stepped closer, taking her free hand in his. "Then choose me." Jane smiled, the first easy, unguarded smile she'd let herself have in longer than she could remember. "I already did." That night, the 3 of them walked into the house together. Not the cold fortress it had been the night Jane first arrived, soaked to the bone with nowhere else to go, but something that finally, fully felt like a home, built one choice at a time, by a woman who refused to let anyone else write her story for her. If this story hit something in you tonight, Queens, I want to know, is family the people who share your blood, or the people who actually show up for you? Tell me in the comments. Hit that like button if Jane earned every bit of her ending, and subscribe if you want to be here for the next one, because trust me, this isn't the last story I've got for you.